Welcome to Module 4, Making Academic Experience Legible to the Private Sector. By the time you've completed graduate school, you've developed a range of tools and capabilities to express yourself. Most likely, this is predominated by written and verbal communications, but perhaps you have some skills around PowerPoint presentations and other data visualization tools. This module will provide you with targeted guidance and tips on how to effectively demonstrate your experience and expertise in a way that is understandable to the private sector and helps you stand out among job candidates. Along these lines, we'll be talking about how to build your own website that showcases your expertise, helps you to stand out among other job candidates, and we'll also talk about how to effectively communicate the impact that you've had.
It's very common for UX designers, either in tech or other private sector industries, to have websites showcasing their work or to have some kind of portfolio that's shareable online. However, it's less common amongst UX researchers to have similar online portfolios or websites, which is why it'll help you stand out amongst other applicants while still being within the norm of UX more generally. It'll provide you with a super dynamic way to contextualize your academic work on your own terms, which, as you probably already know, is really difficult to do when constrained to a one-page resume. A side caution with online websites or portfolios is to consider what you'll be sharing and what you'll not be sharing or disclosing to be sensitive to privacy and confidentiality risks and concerns. An option would be to lock your website or portfolio site with a password that you provide in your resume itself. So your website could take one of three general formats. First option would be a bio plus a resume. Second option could be a bio and a resume and your portfolio of work. And the third option could be a portfolio plus a consulting company type offering. The bio plus resume combo is a good fit if your past work is highly conceptual and complex and doesn't lend itself to engaging visualizations. If your work is fairly analogous to UX type research, then you might consider making a website that features your bio plus a resume and your portfolio of work. And if you feel like your past work doesn't easily translate to UX research and you need to get a few industry-friendly projects under your belt to help you make the jump into UX, then a website with your portfolio and a consulting company offering might be the way to go.
Starting from the top, the quickest and easiest option, and perhaps the biggest bang for your buck, is building a website that showcases relevant aspects of your personal and professional background and displays your resume content in a visually attractive way. Your bio should include a mix of personal information and professionally relevant details about who you are and your education and work history. The personal information included should not be overpowering, but enough to add a relatable human component as well as biographical detail, especially if it has significant import on your chosen field of study or work. With regards to your educational and work history, keep in mind that it should complement and be consistent with what appears on your resume. With fairly limited effort, this kind of website can help you establish your professional brand by projecting to your network of contacts and future employers what you have to offer in a way that allows you to contextualize your experience and really control the narrative of who you are. You might also consider adding a section to your website that showcases your best project work, especially if it's highly relevant to UX research or requires additional explanation and visual aids. A website with a portfolio of work offers all of the benefits outlined previously while also presenting your work through convincing descriptions, appealing layout and design, and engaging images. Later in this module, we'll also discuss the STAR method for compelling storytelling in business settings, especially for communicating impact. Emphasizing again, it's critical to have all aspects of your personal website complementary and reinforcing. As much as the term "my brand" might elicit negative feelings and reflexes in you, what you're essentially trying to do is impress upon your audience a set of core values and themes about you and your work. To do this, redundancy is actually key.
Depending on what your past academic or other professional experience looks like, you may need to carry out a few private sector oriented projects to beef up your resume prior to officially transitioning into UX research. One really effective approach for doing this is by creating a consulting company website. This site would provide potential clients with your biographical sketch, a portfolio of your work, and importantly, a section that summarizes your research and methodological expertise for project services they could hire you to carry out. To find consulting company opportunities, consider some self-promotion across any number of the professional networking sites that we recommend in Module 5. Also, you may need to do one or two smaller UX research consulting gigs for free before you can score a paying client. Taking the consultant company route might feel like a fake it till you make it approach into UX research, and it does come with the hassle of setting up a small business, but it has its benefits. First, you gain hands-on UX research experience, which you can refer to in job applications and interviews. Secondly, it can help cover any gaps in your resume regarding employment as you're technically self-employed as a UX researcher. Also, creating a consultant company will lend you an air of entrepreneurship and make you look like a proactive leader, all of which are qualities employers generally value. Third, by having a really polished consultant website, it can go a long way in helping you land gig research work and other UX adjacent jobs, which you can leverage as past experience when you're applying for UX research positions. Returning to your portfolio, although you might not believe it, potential employers aren't going to ask you if you are paid for the projects you display on your website or talk about during an interview. What they're really interested in is hearing you talk about the kinds of projects you've done, not the financial compensation involved. What this means for you is that you can go ahead and feature past academic work, volunteer studies, as well as paid projects all the same. Also, you can start promoting your consulting company first and worry about making your business official, getting your business license, or forming an LLC later. Only once you've been contracted to do a study or a project of some kind, you really need to worry about formalizing your company and getting the administrative part in order. And again, UX research employers are not going to be concerned with the legal or tax status of your consulting company, but rather what kind of project experience and skills you gained while running it. In the course notes for this module, you'll find some really helpful resources to explore if you want help building a website. There are also several examples of consulting websites that were started by former academics, as well as examples of personal websites from UX researchers.
On your website, as with your one-page resume, you really want to hit home the impact your work has had. You might be slightly silently and audibly groaning at the mention of impact again, but don't worry, this is completely normal. Regardless of how long you've worked in the private sector, this is a feeling that still comes up. Be that as that may, wherever we have worked, demonstrate impact has been the most important criteria for job candidate considerations. Your ability or inability to convey the impact of your work can quickly make or break your application. So let's spend some time talking about impact and how academics can bring enough evidence to the table to show that you have impact too. Impact can come in a number of shapes and sizes. Recalling from the last module, we defined impact more broadly as meaningful change that can be evidenced, be it through measurements and metrics, perception and understanding, or in processes and practice. To make it meaningful, there's a clear before state, a clear after state, and your work is the catalyst of change. The larger the degree or scale of change, the more meaningful it becomes. So let's get into some classic presentations of impact and meaningful change within the field of UX research. They include surfacing misconceptions or assumptions, identifying unknown unknowns, thought leadership, establishing a field or approach, and instigating change. Note that this isn't an exhaustive list, and we do enumerate various other forms of impact throughout the course series, so do keep an eye out for that. To begin, let's touch on surfacing misconceptions or assumptions. This is a type of impact where there is a certain presupposition about how something ostensibly works and why it's the way it is, or even how it should be. Think about gender norms, for example. Consider previous assumptions that women have weaker mental and physical constitutions than men and therefore not suited to workplace settings. This perception has been disputed and wholly overturned through a wave of feminist and gender studies, Nonetheless, it was a predominant assumption believed to be fundamental truth at one time. The impact in this case was to first identify these prevailing beliefs as just that, beliefs, so that they might be problematized as singular truths or natural states of being. A similar argument can be made in the private sector, where teams might have certain assumptions about users' motivations and perceptions for engaging in a certain project or feature. These might be simply unfounded and need to be challenged, and that's where your role as researcher for surfacing misconceptions or assumptions comes in. Another approach for capturing impact that is amenable to academic research experience is showcasing how and where you've gone about identifying unknown unknowns. That is, things or relationships between them that were previously not visible or not seen. This could include variables that may influence or inform perceptions, expectations, or beliefs. This could also include core value drivers behind people's behaviors. Thought leadership is another important impact area that generally translates pretty smoothly from academia to the private sector. Thought leadership includes the sharing of novel findings amongst colleagues or at a conference, publishing academic work in pertinent journals and edit volumes, knowledge dissemination through teaching, or the development of new research methods to execute work in particularly challenging spaces. Examples of impact in the form of establishing a field or approach includes the following: identifying and exploring gaps in previous scholarship, be it conceptual or fact-based. Perhaps new information has been brought to light because of a certain approach being taken. Secondly, developing a research program that covers multiple foci or perhaps locations. And lastly, coordinating collaboration with subject matter experts around a topic or issue. Demonstrating that you and your work catalyzes change constitutes a powerful form of impact. Showing real-world consequences can range from the concrete to the intangible. Tangible consequences include such things as welfare policy change, or perhaps a positive shift in silence community members starting to voice their struggles publicly. Examples of intangible changes might include identifying new approaches to a problem space, a new angle for identity politics to surface injustices. Remember in Module 3, we covered some examples of how to draft resume statements that show before and after states, positioning your work and role as change agent. The same practice can be applied here for showcasing intangible and tangible state changes and how you and your work was the actor or agent of change.
Whether it be on your job resume, in your interview presentation, or at a UX meetup, you'll need to practice and internalize how to effectively communicate the various facets of your work experience and its impact in a clear and concise way. The STAR method is a commonly employed framework and easy-to-use acronym for effective goal-oriented verbal and written communication. The acronym stands for Situation, Task, Action, Result, with another R added in some cases as reflection. The STAR method is really useful in situations when you need to convey a lot of complex information to an audience that isn't familiar with your area of expertise, for example, when talking with a hiring manager, when writing a resume, and when giving a presentation. And while this isn't the only format to frame your work experience and communicate it, it's among the most recognizable and often used in business settings. In fact, the STAR method is so commonly deployed and universally understood that companies like Amazon will actually ask that you utilize the STAR method to discuss your own work as part of their interview process. Now let's spend some time breaking down the different components of the STAR method: situation, task, action, result, and reflection in some cases. Starting with the S, situation. More than likely, the folks interviewing you will be highly intelligent and have expertise in broad tech-related domains. However, it's unlikely that your interviewers will have sufficient background knowledge to easily understand the context in which your past research and experience has taken place. So it's really incumbent upon you to spell it out. To do this, you'll need to describe the general context or situation surrounding your research. giving your audience a basic understanding of the landscape in which your work was carried out and the importance of said context for your larger narrative regarding your impact. And remember, you're trying to deliver situational awareness to a non-academic audience, so don't lean too heavily on overly specific or theoretical, that is academic, context to ground the problem your research was addressing. When you begin explaining the situation of a given research project, you want to start broad. Situate your study within a super wide context to make sure your audience is on board and grasps the overall situation from the start of your explanation. For example, you could start to describe an academic research project about off-grid solar energy in Latin America by starting with a broader problem, setting the global context in which your project takes place. Something like, today, nearly 1 billion people on Earth still don't have access to reliable, modern energy service. This can result from a combination of factors including economic, infrastructural, and environmental. Then in the next part of your description of the situation, you should describe the specific application of that problem. This could go something like, in places like the Peruvian Andes, with its rugged terrain and remote settlement patterns, it makes extending the national electric grid especially challenging. In the last part of your situation description, it should get more specific by describing the proposed solution identified through your research. Something like, as a result, decentralized solar energy systems are needed to close the energy access gap in rural Peru. Now let's move from situation to the T in STAR, task. So after you've described the situational landscape in which your project takes place, you'll want to transition right into talking about the task. Now as a researcher, this part should be like second nature by now. So here, you'll lay out the main tasks or objectives that your project aims to address or understand. At this point, you'll also want to introduce the thematic challenges that you confronted in your research project. For example, as an ethnographer, perhaps some of the related challenges of this project had to do with disaggregating the effects of ideology versus practice, along with the many material difficulties confronted during fieldwork. So this could go something like, this project examined the practices and philosophies that have contributed to the success of X energy company's solar energy program in rural Peru. This type of project was especially challenging as it aimed to evaluate long-term sustainability of rural energy programs, all the while dealing with adverse topography, wary research subjects, long days, and unpredictable schedule changes. Moving now into the action part of your project description, you'll want to describe in some detail the main things you did to achieve the tasks you outlined previously. So here you'll want to discuss the methods you employed in this project, describe how carrying out these methods actually played out on the ground, talk about who you may have collaborated with, and the different phases of the project overall. For example, this could go something like, this study was an institutional ethnography which involved being embedded with an X energy company over the course of 3 months. During this time, I rode along with the company technicians, observing their interactions with energy end users during their day-to-day operations. These operations included installation and removal of solar home systems, collection of delinquent energy payments, and warehousing and cataloging of energy equipment. Additionally, I carried out one-on-one interviews with these technicians, exploring their perceptions about the factors that support the energy program's sustainability. The last part of the STAR method, results, is a bit of a misnomer. Ideally, what you want to do is not only deliver the results in a coherent, cohesive way, but also mention the format through which you disseminated results. Was it a journal publication, a recommendation to a formal body, or perhaps a book chapter? And then most importantly, discuss the impact or potential impact that your study had. And if time allows, you can also add a reflection section where you discuss what you might have done differently if you were to do the project all over again. This can be a valuable and effective way of pulling back the curtain on your thought process and really show you've reflected on the advantages and disadvantages and the why behind various research approaches. However, if your presentation is running long, you can definitely cut the reflection section to save time. So results might go something like this. This project showed that X energy company's dedication to community development, seen in X, Y, and Z examples, is a main factor that contributes to its ongoing success. These findings formed part of a larger recommendation made to the country's United Nations representative, and this formal recommendation urged the UN program to take X and Y actions based on the findings of my research. Additionally, this corresponding chapter of my dissertation, entitled X, was recently published in the Journal of Something or Other Studies.
Congratulations, you've completed Module 4. So let's recap what we managed to cover in this module. In this module, we talked about a few techniques by which you can better communicate your academic experience to those in the private sector. One of those approaches is to create a website. A website is one concrete thing you can do to help your work experience be more understandable to hiring managers. It also helps you stand out against other job candidates that likely have more business or private sector experience than you. So, creating a website is one way that you can help get your application flagged for an interview. Also, before we forget, check the course notes below because we've provided some helpful resources on how to build out a website, along with some good examples of UX research websites that we've liked. We've gone over several types of impact, detailing how you can transform your academic experience and history, repackage it into more legible and impressive private sector impact narratives. Also, we covered the STAR method, which stood for situation, task, action, result, and if you have time, there's that extra R of reflection. The STAR method is a useful approach to help ensure that all of your complex and meaningful work is formatted so that it's easily digestible, easily communicated, and coherent to a non-academic audience. Leveraging these lessons will help ensure that all of your hard-won academic experience is effectively distilled and made palatable to recruiters and hiring managers in the field of UX research. So let's keep plugging forward and move on to Module 5.